All right, welcome back to the Copywriters Podcast with your host, the world's greatest copywriting coach, David Garfinkel. David, how are you doing today?
Nathan, I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm ready for what is going to be an interesting episode of the podcast, I'm sure.
Actually, we're going to get scientific. You know, we don't usually give out formulas on this show, but today I'm going to start with one. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Empathy equals $80 million. I got that. I actually created it from looking at the work of our guest today, Emily McGuire. She's a big-time specialist in email marketing, and her email campaigns have earned clients over $80 million in revenue. The reason I put empathy in that formula is Emily says her guiding principle is leading with empathy, figuring out where your prospects and repeat customers are in their buying cycle or customer journey, and then re-engaging them as they start to cool off. So in her business, Flourish and Grit, that's what it's called. Emily has worked with consumer brands, health and wellness businesses, and software as a service companies in the tech space. So a lot of different types of businesses. But her most famous client is probably Adam and Eve, the adult toy store. And she used her empathy approach to increase their profits by 36% just with email campaigns. So before we get into Emily's wisdom and practical advice, I'd like you to increase your own business excellence by heeding the following. Copy is powerful. You're responsible for how you use what you hear in this podcast. And most of the time, common sense is all you need. But if you make extreme claims, and or if you're writing copy for offers in highly regulated industries like health and finance and business opportunity, you may want to get a legal review after you write and before you start using your copy. My larger clients do this all the time. Emily, welcome, and thanks for being here. Really glad you can join us.
Hi, me. Super excited.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm just betting you polarize audiences, and maybe you get some clients to go, when you tell them that if they want to sell more with their emails, they should stop pitching and including a buy button so often. First, do I have that right? And secondly, if I do, or even if I don't, why do you say that?
Well, getting my clients to say, is a really a real win, I think, just because making them think about copy and messaging and campaigns in a totally different way. But I would say that, buy now buttons, they have a place, right? But not in every single email. And what I've found is that, I find folks are on the two ends of the spectrum with email marketing or marketing in general, I think. And that's, they're really afraid to either only ask, making those sales pitches. They don't want to do that. So they tend to veer on the side of extra caution and only serve content that doesn't really give people a clear call to action. Or you have people on the opposite end of the spectrum who are only asking you to buy. And they're, buy. And they're scared of serving content because they've come to rely on those sales emails to generate the revenue they again are betting on, right? They need to pay the bills and all the things.
Yeah.
And I've worked in both of those places, right? I worked for companies in both of those places. And what I've found is the people who are always pitching, always sending sales emails, they make a lot of money. They make a ton of money. But on the back end, those businesses tend to hemorrhage contacts at a much higher rate than people who do their copy and messaging from a more blended approach, which is serving that content, serving really empathetic messaging in their campaigns, and asking whether or not that is whatever the goal is for that campaign, right?
Hmm.
So from my perspective and my experience, I've seen that blended approach work so much better with retaining contacts, right? And retaining customers as well. And the revenue might not match up to those buy now people, but the profit looks a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that occurs to me is so many people doing email marketing are very much in the here and now, not in a good way. And so they're saying, how much money did we bring in today? How much did we bring in today? But, the strategists, the people, and I think part of you is a strategist, although I know you are an implementer. The strategists step back and say, well, if you really look at things long term, about 80% of the business from any one customer comes from the second purchase, the third purchase, the fourth purchase, the fifth purchase, the sixth purchase. And so if you're going to lose those people because you're going bam, 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 not so good for the profit picture, like you said.
You've just lost your most profitable contacts, who could be increasing that bottom line for you. Instead, those folks end up chasing new leads all the time instead of thinking about retaining who they've already got on board with them. And that's a much less profitable strategy.
Yeah, I know too many companies like that, some of them pretty up close and personal. They know who they are, but I'm not going to embarrass them here. Maybe in a private conversation. Let's walk through some examples of how you've helped companies improve sales and strengthen their communities. You up for that, to give us some specifics?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So like you mentioned already in my intro, I work in e-commerce and in tech and SaaS. Those two business types have very different sales cycles, right? One can be minutes, the others could be years.
Yeah.
And so I've got an example from a client who they're B2B. They are a video management platform, and at the beginning of COVID, video exploded. I mean, it was already a big deal as it was, but now people needed it, not just wanted it. And so I took their approach from sending very short emails that were primarily the call to action was contact a sales rep, to how do we keep people engaged on the list and make sure that when they are ready to talk to a salesperson, they know exactly how to do that. So one example I have, again, from this company, and it's targeted toward higher education institutions.
Hmm.
And so I'll just give you a little bit from it. Your campus classroom paradigm has changed at record speed. You probably went from using a little bit of video to depending on it full time this school year. Now that your head is not reeling from making 1 million decisions about online learning, it's time to start preparing for your regularly scheduled classroom experience. Or is it? Returning to an in-person classroom may not be in your near future. And what if you find, as you adjust to hybrid learning, that some of your students and faculty prefer it? There's no better time for a long-term plan for hybrid learning than right now. The hardest part is finding the right tools to make your job as easy as possible. That's why we put together the toolbox for hybrid learning in a video-first world. And then it goes into the benefits of that toolbox. So what we found from these types of campaigns when we started switching to this copy method, which was much more empathetic, it was much more conversational, talking to subscribers like they're actual human beings, was
What
that
a
they're
concept!
more, I
What a
know, right?
concept! Hmm.
What we found was the salespeople's highest quality leads were coming from email campaigns. The
Yeah,
highest quality.
yeah, and something, I don't know if you did it on purpose or intuitively, but there was a phrase in there that I just loved. You said when you get back to your regularly scheduled classroom learning. Well, that phrase comes from TV. We now get back to our regularly scheduled program. Did you
Hmm.
did you did you have that in mind? Were you
Yeah,
being
exactly.
oh, very clever. I love that. That's great. Do you have another example of an email or a campaign? Because you know what, I understand this. I realize you're not asking for the sale, but you're pretty much creating the relationship. Not only that,
Exactly.
you're positioning your client, the vendor, as someone who really knows what's going on, someone who cares. And that's a person, when I'm in trouble, I don't want to call someone who says, "Do you want it in red or blue?" I want someone who is going to take care of me and is not going to push me so hard and is going to try and find out what I need. I mean, I don't think I'm that unusual in that way. Do you?
Why not? I mean, if you're asking for help, you're not going to ask somebody who you think uh, whose primary driver and motivator is to make a sale. Because you're asking for help. You're not asking somebody to take your money right now, you know.
Right, right. If you're
Yeah,
if you're asking to buy something, then you'd probably like to find a salesman. If you're asking for help, you'd like someone who has a slightly broader range of skills. I don't know. All right.
well, who understands the landscape you're dealing with, you know?
Yeah, yeah. All right. So give us another example. That's great.
Yeah, so this one is from an e-commerce client I had. They're known for their snark and their really witty gifts that they offer. I wanted to pull this one because at the time of this recording, we're about a week away from Christmas.
Right.
And so here was one of their holiday campaigns that we put together called the Cozy AF Holiday, because your couch is now your social life. So, so I'll just read the intro to you. The email is always started with a brief little letter from the owner of the business because she's known for her snark,
Yeah.
and then we launch into the products that we offer, or that we're promoting. Okay, give me all of the holly jolly Yuletide deck the halls goodness. There's nothing quite as cheerful as twinkly lights and Mariah Carey singing All I Want for Christmas Is You over and over again. And let's face it, we're in for a long winter, so finding the silver lining to staying aside is what we all need. I don't know about you, but my social agenda for the winter includes lots of hanging out with the cast of Schitt's Creek on my couch. That means hot bevies, cozy blankets, and a brightly lit Christmas tree in the corner. That's how we're celebrating the holidays over here, cozy, comfy, and ready to spread some cheer with a few holiday gifts. Get some inspiration with some of our favorite cozy gifts. And then we go through a ton of, well, not a ton, but a selection of their coziest gifts.
Yeah. That's terrific. First of all, I love the snark in, you know, cozy AF on your couch. And secondly, I'm assuming that most of her customers are women.
Yes. Yep. So they
Yeah.
get the pop culture reference. So she says a lot of pop culture items. So we sprinkle a lot of pop culture references and all of the things that a lot of women would love to own or gift.
Yeah. So that reminds me of a much more interesting version of what I read in People magazine every week. And but also we have a lot of male copywriters on listening to this, and sometimes they say, you know, how do you write to women, or how do women talk? Well, that was a really good example. Women aren't stupid; they're clever, but they do focus on different things. So you might want to rewind the tape a little bit and listen to what Emily was saying. I mean, would you agree with me on what I just said? I'm standing by it, but I'd love to hear your opinion.
I mean, writing for women is not difficult for me because I don't know if you know this, but I'm a woman.
I figured it out I could tell by the glasses. Yeah.
But yeah, there's just different pop culture references, right? There's different little things that women like to talk about in general than men do. So for me, I like to just make myself seem really human, right? And make the copy sound human and talk about things being feeling good, right? Feeling really good. And how do we do that? Especially over COVID. And that was a lot of the copy I wrote for this particular client was about, in particular, how moms were handling the pandemic and all of the things that we can do to celebrate moms and nurses and teachers through gifting. And so, really understanding that experience, I think, helped connect with the audience a lot more.
Do you ever get feedback from people on the list, like notes? I mean, like especially whether they appreciate what you're saying or not, and how they feel about it, and maybe even sending a story that, gosh, that's great because that was exactly like when, or anything like that.
Exactly. Yep, we got a lot of feedback from those campaigns where it was like basically like, thank you, you get me. You get what's going on. And particularly, when we synced those campaigns up across social media, a lot of the comments were the same.
Now, I'm assuming if you're writing for software as a service tech clients, some of those are men, and some of those have men as customers. Do
Yeah.
you find? Okay, I know this is a hey stupid question, but do you find that empathy works well with men, or a man speaking to another man, or is
I
it
mean,
seen
yeah,
as too femmy?
I think that empathy means being able to put yourself in somebody's shoes, and therefore people want to know that you understand them. And you understand where they're coming from, you're understanding their challenges, and that you want to build a relationship with them so you can help them. I don't think that is a gendered thing at all. And you might use different pop culture references, you might use different metaphors, but at the end of the day, it's the same principle.
Yeah, I'm in a group. I'll be meeting with them later today. We read books, and all men, and kind of tech and finance focused, and yeah, pop culture references are like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, but yeah, same difference. Okay, great point. Finally, in the time we have left, could you share a few tips for writing emails? Obviously, you have a formula that works for you, that clients like and that customers like too. Especially one of the things that you told me about when we were having our little chat to get ready for this was how when customers are starting to cool off, how you have a way to re-engage them. Maybe you could focus a few tips on that, because I think everyone has that problem, and I haven't heard too many solutions out there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so like I said, I approach this not only with empathy, but an extension of empathy is understanding where people are in their customer or buying journey. And so, I do a lot of that on the back end, and then develop campaigns to look at, where are people at risk of falling out of your funnel, or where are they cooling off? And so once we do that and understand, like, are we trying to get people just to re-engage with your emails, or are we trying to get them to renew or purchase again, or purchase for the first time in a long time? So I do that in a couple ways. One is like really speaking to that buying stage. So for example, if it's a lead who's never purchased, but they've or signed a contract or whatever it is, who's been on your list for a long time, talking to them like, hey, what's going on? What are you dealing with right now? And, we know you've been on the list for a while. Let's have a conversation kind of messaging, right? For re-engaging people, just to get them engaged on your email list, again, it's talking to them where they are in their stage. Like, we miss that sort of generic, we miss you. Here's all the things we've been up to since you've last been a customer, or maybe since you last uh, opened an email. Here are all the cool things going on, the great products, customer favorites, whatever it is. And then also thinking about gamifying your emails. There's a lot of options out there to get people to turn an email into a game, right? There's a lot of technical tools out there to do that. So thinking about it in terms of gaming, like you can do those spin the wheels, or have a little maze that people go through, just something for engagement's sake. And I think that we don't think about that all the time, especially when people are hyper focused on the revenue right now, instead of thinking about the long game and making sure your list is engaged and interested in getting your emails. So when they are ready, they will purchase.
There's a couple things I'd like to comment on what you just said. And part of it redounds back to our conversation yesterday. You mentioned that you do a lot of implementation, but you also get into the back end, which I think means you're going to be looking at the CRM or the list manager, whatever it is exactly called, and you're going to be segmenting probably to a greater degree than a lot of people do to actually know when somebody hasn't opened an email for 90 days. That's the other thing, that just being so upfront and not weasel wordy, but just very direct about, hey, you've been on this list a long time and we haven't talked. I'd like to know what's going on with you. I don't know if I've ever gotten an email like that. But if I did, I would be more likely to respond to that than the emails I get from one of my clients who every day says, "We're not sure you're receiving our emails." That's how it always starts. I see you rolling your eyes for our audio listeners. So this is great information.
I would just like to point out, you guys talked a lot about empathy and understanding how the person feels that you're writing to, but you didn't point out, but it came through in when Emily was reading the emails. I think Maya Angelou said, people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. There's a very deliberate, not just understanding how the reader feels, but understanding how you want them to feel, that I think kind of went unspoken throughout today's episode. But if you go back and re-listen to it and re-listen to these emails, there's a very deliberate, this is how I want you to feel as you're reading this email. And I think that is so important.
It is. And I'd like to point out, it only went unspoken until you spoke it.
There you go.
But I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you have an open rate offer.
Exactly. Yeah, I have a free action guide called Revolutionize Your Email Open Rates. And I go through, what are some of the myths of open rates and how to really understand them better. And then a subject line formula I use to write, all the subject lines all day, every day, and some action items and things to think about. So it's at flourishgrit.com/open.
Okay, flourishgrit.com/open. And we'll put that in the show notes too, so people can click on it and get see what you're up to. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This was a fantastic episode, and we will definitely put a link in the show notes to where people can get that. And if you're listening and you want to know where you can find the show notes, you can always head over to copywriterspodcast.com. Make sure that while you're there, you subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, we will catch you later.
See you later.